Hello, humans. It's your host, Kory, here today with best-selling author Angela Roquet. She's a fantasy author of the Lana Harvey series, the Blood Vice series, and more. She lives in the Lake of the Ozarks in Missouri with her husband, son, and a very fluffy dog in a house stuffed with books, toys, skulls, owls, and glitter-speckled craft supplies. I know of Angela because we became friends many, many years ago. I read her book, Graveyard Shift, which is the first book in the Lana Harvey series. And then I wrote her a very enthusiastic email and said, be my writer friend. And she gladly agreed. I think this was probably, what, 2013, do you think? How long ago was this?
Yeah, it's been a while. I don't know why I feel like it was even longer than that, but I mean, this whole
Yeah, it
last
was a long
decade's felt
time.
the same, so.
Yes, but I just remember harassing you into being my friend. We became friends. We formed a critique group, and there were four of us, and we called ourselves the Four Horsemen of the Bookopocalypse. Book Apocalypse. I don't even know how to pronounce our name. And so I know you as Death, and I am to you Conquest, which anyone listening is going to be like, what is going but that's how we address ourselves in our emails and our chats. And so I wanted to invite you today onto the Well Care for Humans show because not only are you a very creative person and you've had a really interesting healing journey for yourself, but very recently in the last year or so, it's taken a particular turn. And so I think that you sharing your experiences overcoming your health scare would be really valuable to the listeners of the show. And so I want to start by asking you a little bit more about your experience. And so for those of you who don't know you, because I know that some of us, we have some of the same fans that they get emails be like, hi, I just finished Angela's book and I'm going to read yours next. So I know that we have some crossover already, but for those of
Yeah,
them, the listeners who don't know you, last year, Angela was diagnosed with stage 3 cervical cancer. So take us
it was
through that a little
actually
bit.
yeah, I was gonna say it was actually 2023. It's
Okay.
weird to think that we're already into
I
2025
know.
now.
I keep forgetting that we're in a new year, but so more than a year ago, you were diagnosed. And so take us through that experience for you, and then let us know maybe what the most challenging aspects of facing an illness like that was.
Sure. I think especially for like self-published authors like us who run our own businesses, we are inclined to burn that midnight oil, burn the candle at
Oh,
both ends, all the metaphors
absolutely.
there. Uh, and
What is clocking out? I don't even know what that is.
yeah,
Like, it's like when do you
it's just a
stop?
24/7. But and especially like I say when we hit this age, like we're getting so old, but when you start,
Ancient.
you start to hit that 40-year mark, like you're getting closer to it, you can tend to ignore health problems because in your head you justify it. Well, this is probably just part of getting old. This is
Right.
probably just the natural aging process. And especially when it's an inconvenience because it's going to interrupt your work when you're working all the time and you certainly want to meet your deadlines and you have schedules. And so stopping to take care of yourself, to go to a doctor to find out what's going on can seem like a major inconvenience. And it is, to be fair, but so it was probably even sooner, but I can distinctly remember through 2022 feeling that downhill slide of I'm
Mhm.
tired all the time. There's brain fog, distraction, like having a hard time focusing. I was having ocular migraines that made it very difficult to type because it just kind of sliced up my vision. And so I had to just stop for a while and close my eyes. I was having leg swelling, and I thought that was probably just from sitting too long at my desk, which I'm sure that helped contribute to it. And then there were some other things that got progressively worse, and I will spare you the graphic details. But
I'm
in
sure they can
2020,
handle it, but only share what you're comfortable with sharing for sure. Like you don't
well,
have to like put all of it out, out
sure.
for the
Well,
public
and
consumption.
I think they can probably guess from knowing that like I had cervical cancer and there was a
Yeah.
tumor on my cervix, so I
Yes.
was bleeding quite profusely. And it was
Right.
one of those where you start to wonder because I also have PCOS. So when you have
Mhm.
other health conditions, you can tend to ignore symptoms and just brush them off as, oh, this is just part of having PCOS, where I might go for like 7 months without a cycle at all and then have one that lasts for 3 weeks.
Yeah.
Well, at the beginning like of 2023, I had one that lasted for 3 months and I thought it was a cycle, but instead it was just a massive tumor on my cervix that was bleeding. And I was in pain. I was eating tons of ibuprofen, just waiting for this, period to pass, when my husband finally said, "This is ridiculous. You need to make a doctor appointment." And so I finally did. And I had to like do some research because I didn't have a regular doctor. I was horrible at self care. I hadn't been to see a regular doctor for a checkup since like the 6 week checkup after having my son back in 2011. So I was really terrible at self care in that department. Um, and so I finally made an appointment in March, but I didn't get to go in to see the doctor until June. Like that's how backed up this quality doctor that I had reached out to. And from there, it was one of those dread things. I'm like, okay, something's going to be wrong and it's going to take a whole bunch of time to deal with. And it took even more than I expected it to. But once I went in and had like a pap done, she called me back in for a biopsy. And then it was, oh, you're going to need an ultrasound and an CT scan and an MRI and then a PET scan, and then go to an oncologist and get staged and then sent to a cancer clinic and start chemo and radiation. And it all happened very quickly. And as writers, I think like I lost a lot of sleep there, and not just because I
Yeah.
was dreading this idea that, oh my God, it's stage 3 cancer and my chances of surviving this are, scary
Questionable.
slim.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's horrible, like doing that research. And they tell you, don't do that. Don't do that.
They're like, don't look.
And there's a lot of reasons not to do it. And one of the ones that made the most sense in my, like logically, because everyone says like, I'm going to research it. Are you kidding me? Like if something's about to kill me, I'm going to know what it looks like. I'm going to look it in the eyes. So,
Yeah.
but also you have to remember that treatments are changing every day. Outcomes are changing. So the statistics you're looking at, even if they're a year old, they're not like a true depiction of, you know, survival rate. Like you might see something from 10 years ago that says, oh, you have a 35% chance of surviving this. And then you'll see something from a year later and it's like, well, your chances are more like 60%. So it is improving every day. So getting really worked up over the statistics that are even a year outdated I think it can negatively impact a lot of people's outlook on their prognosis on how this treatment's going to work. Um, I think having thick skin and just being generally optimistic, I'm a very much a silver lining kind of person, helped a lot. But it was a lot to go through. It was a lot to go
Oh,
through.
absolutely. It sounds like it. And you're bringing up a lot of really interesting intersections just with mental health in general. So, first of all, you didn't go to the doctor for a long time.
Yeah,
And to me, that sounds like something that I experienced as well, which is like medical anxiety. We don't talk a lot about medical anxiety or medical trauma, the things that happened in the past, and it makes us not want to go seek. Like
sure.
we don't want. I don't even.
Well,
I'm like, actually, maybe I would rather die than go through
I
that
can
again.
pinpoint several things of medical trauma in my past, but I think okay, for instance, my very first pap as a teenager, my mother was in the room. The doctor barely made eye contact with me or spoke to me. He spoke to my mother as he was giving me the exam, and I felt like I was being prepared on a cooking show.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so that was my lovely first experience. And then the same doctor, when I was playing soccer, I had some friction, the panty line area. I
Mhm.
should have probably gone to a dermatologist, but my mother thought, let's just go back to this gynecologist who had nurses hold me down and took a pair of scissors to cut open this cyst in the corner of my leg there and packed it
Mhm.
and then told me I was done playing soccer. I wouldn't be finishing the season and laughed me off because I'm sure there was
Mhm.
some misogyny in there too.
Yeah.
So yeah, there were a lot of experiences there. There's also the medical thing. I was diagnosed at 4 years old with rheumatoid arthritis. So for the longest time, I wasn't even able to get health insurance because of pre-existing conditions. So between that and my PCOS. And so it was always a matter of just growing up and even getting out on my own. You don't go to the doctor unless you're dying because it's going to cost you a fortune. So
Yes. I mean, and that's definitely a larger issue that we have in the American
yeah,
healthcare system about, what the impact, the financial impact of trying to make those decisions for sure. In
yeah.
addition to that, it does sound like also there was this question of the overlying conditions, right? And we had a similar situation with Kim's dad. I spoke to openly about this before. I had a different episode in which I was trying to talk about my best way to support her when her dad died. But they thought his illness for a long time was the result of long COVID. And so we know during that COVID period, there are a lot of people died of one thing or another that wasn't COVID related. It's just people thought it was COVID. So there's often this issue of it looks like one thing, but it's something else. And so it sounds like that was in play for you as well, which is like, you're like, well, I have PCOS, maybe it's that, maybe
Yeah.
there's something going on there. And so there's this lag in the diagnosis as well.
I think with women, you deal with a lot of dismissive attitudes because that's historically like, oh, you're, the
You're
hysteria, the one
hysterical. You
that
don't know what you like. You just want some
so,
pain
and no one
pills.
wants to
Yeah.
be treated that way. So I think a lot of women are resistant to go to the doctor too because they don't want to be told that, oh, this pain and all these conditions you're dealing with, it's just in your head. You're just crazy and
Yeah.
brushed off that way. And it's like, do I want to pay someone to talk to me that way and still not have help for my condition? And so you push it off because who wants to deal with that? So
Yeah, no one wants to be treated that way for sure, right? It's already incredibly vulnerable to go and get help, to take your clothes off for a stranger and be
yeah,
examined. You don't want them to then be mean to you while you're doing it. So it is a very delicate situation. I
yeah,
have been fortunate that the doctor I have now, she is very compassionate. I do feel safe with her. And I've been able to be very honest with her about like, look, this was the terrible thing that happened the last time I was with the doctor.
yeah.
And she's been very trauma informed in her care with me. So I think it does matter who you
I
see.
do.
If the person is not good for you, go find
Yeah.
somebody
And
else.
well, with the medical trauma with the past doctors, I actually, when I first moved out, I was still a teenager and still couldn't get health insurance because this was all before, the Affordable Care Act made it to where you couldn't deny someone for pre-existing conditions. So I went to a Planned Parenthood in my hometown to get birth control, to get my annual PAPs done because it was affordable as a teenager without insurance. And I made friends with the doctor, I guess a nurse practitioner there, who I'm still friends with to this day. And I reached out to her and asked her to refer me to a doctor. And she very quickly did. And it probably saved my life being able to have someone I trusted refer me to a quality doctor that I trusted who she would direct me to. So, and um, I think if as authors we're good at research, so you can get on like health grades and really check out these doctors. But I think it
Yes.
also there's a level of comfort that comes from getting a referral from someone who's trusted too. So
Yes, that's absolutely true. And so I'm going to return to this idea that you brought up earlier, which is that you kind of mentioned in passing how you had to really manage your emotions. You had to really manage your kind of death spiral thoughts about this
yeah,
situation. It seemed like there was a lot of mental work that you were having to do to keep yourself from panicking, from thinking the worst,
yeah.
to remain positive throughout this experience. So tell us a little bit about, it doesn't have to be like a detailed strategy, but it's kind of like what was helping you stay grounded? Like what was helping you to not go into those dark places, to be optimistic and a participant in this experience, even though it was really challenging for you at the time?
I've heard you talk about it, and it's something I've heard a lot about too. But like you think about gratitude, and I had a moment of panic too, where the majority of my close friends um, live far away. Like my closest friends all live in different states,
Yeah.
and
Common
I was
with older people.
yeah, yeah, sure. And so I was very lucky in that I have a good partner. I think that really puts a lot of pressure on people too, getting help, but having in your head like to know you have a good partner who's going to be there for you. And I remember joining some of the support groups online and seeing a lot of women, their downward spiral with their health worries was compounded by the fact that they didn't have quality partners, that partners that were upset with them for no longer taking care of them because they,
Wow.
or were leaving them because they were no longer able to serve certain needs of theirs. And so I
Yeah.
felt horrible for them. And in the back of my mind, you read all these stories and you think, I never had to worry about Paul, like my husband, doing that. Like
Mm.
we're best friends. And I never once worried that he was going to leave me over this or become cold towards me or even abusive in some of the instances I read. I never once worried about that. Um, And so I was very lucky in that regard. And my mother also came down and helped. She's a business owner, but a lot of people in these people's circles, they still have to maintain full-time careers. They can't just take off to help you through like the worst time of your life. So I was very lucky that my husband at the time was still a house spouse and my mother was a business owner. So I had two people there that were always available to help me when I needed to go for treatments, which were very regular for a stretch there. It was like 5 days a week for radiation, once a week for chemo, and then a couple times a week for brachytherapy, another form of radiation later. So having at least a couple people that you can really, really rely on that are available, and you can't fault some people that have to work full time who don't have
Sure.
time they can take off. But that did make it easier. And so I know that's not something that everyone is
I'm
going to have.
immediately thinking of someone hyper independent like me who doesn't know how to ask anyone for help. You could come collect me from a ditch and you're like, Kory just asked me to help you. And I'm like,
I'm very
I
independent
can't.
too. Yeah, I'm very independent too, and it felt almost like a burden. Like there were so many people that were saying, "Oh, set up a GoFundMe so people can help because this is going to be expensive," and it was expensive. Even with insurance, we forked out thousands of dollars. We met our deductible for the first time, and I had to take time off work because you can't go get filled up with chemo and then go through radiation and then come home and type out a novel. Like it just doesn't work that way. I'd come
Yeah, I
home and
can't
want to go
imagine the creative well, the folk. I can't
direct.
imagine it would be there. People I think really underestimate how much brain power it takes to be creative, and I just can't imagine mustering that if I was that stressed, if I was that worried, if
Well,
I was that
and for me,
scared,
it was keeping my
tired.
emotions in check and staying optimistic. Zave, my son, with his autism and his language delay, he didn't quite understand what was going on. I think he could tell I was sick and I was going in for treatment. But where we went for treatment, they have a mall that has a carousel, and so anytime we'd go up for a radiation treatment, we'd stop by the mall and take him on the carousel. And this is partly through the tail end of COVID still being an issue, and also with my cancer I had to be very careful with my immune system down, so we'd all mask up and we'd all go ride the carousel after radiation, and that's about all I had
So
the energy.
he's like that great time in my life when we would always go to the carousel. Dad, no, I mean,
We
he doesn't
tried to
even
make
like
sure it
understand.
wasn't a horrible thing for him, and he'd sit in the waiting rooms while I was
Yeah.
going through these treatments with this iPad, and he's a good kid, and he really hung in there through all that with us. And he's just the sweetest. He'd come up and snuggle me and give me kisses. Like I might not be able to explain exactly what I was going through, but part of my, I guess, motivation too for making sure I was staying upbeat about all of this was because I didn't want Zabe to see me melt down and look hopeless. I didn't
Right.
want to put him through that and not be able to explain. So anytime I did have a meltdown, which I had a few, I think anyone going
I
through
mean, I
something like
think that's pretty rational.
yeah,
I don't know if you were absolutely stoic, I'd be like, you might need
yeah,
to talk to someone. You're clearly really
yeah.
masking the experience that you're having right
That
now.
was that was generally something I'd save for when I was by myself or with Paul on occasion because it was hard on him too. And it was
Yeah.
one of those where you really, when you're one of those people that doesn't focus on your own emotions as much and you're worried about everyone around you, like it's a distraction. It's a good distraction though, and it helped. It helped me. It was like I gotta keep upbeat. I gotta keep smiling through this
Yeah.
because this is already hard enough on the people I love, especially the ones that, like my brother and sister living 2.5 hours away. I knew it was hard for them not being able to be here with me all the time because they had jobs, but I talked to a lot of people on the phone, so,
Yeah.
but
Yes. And I'm glad that you had people around you to support you during that time. Yes, having
so
other people who've had similar experiences, being able to get that information from them, get that reassurance from them, connecting with people in your life that do love and support you. It sounds like that's a really important part of managing your mental health.
yeah,
But hyper independence is a trauma response. So
it
it can
is.
be
Yeah.
hard to like balance and negotiate the two. Well, let me ask you, how do you feel? Because I'm sure that from this experience, you've learned to live differently, to have your relationship with yourself differently, to treat yourself differently.
Yeah,
Obviously there's been an impact on your connections, which we just talked about, but
sure.
how have your routines changed? Like, what does self-care look like for you now? Like, how do you think that it has reshaped your life in a way maybe that you didn't expect, or maybe that's better for you, or maybe it's hard to adjust? I'm not sure, but tell us, like, what do you think?
Sure.
The
Well,
different.
for every issue, I feel like there's two sides of the coin. Like you talk, like how have things changed? And I do listen to my body more now, but um, it's also a source of, I don't want to say panic, but it's one of those things like every little pain now, I feel like going through something that big, the first thought of my head is the cancer back. And so I've had
Mhm.
to really learn how to rein that in and say, okay, this is probably a minor ache or pain. Like,
Right.
you know, like to really gauge. But I think through this too, you start to find new benchmarks for what is okay and what is not okay, and what is something you should be seeing a doctor about. And, you know, is this a tumor or is it gas? Like there, it's the
There's a
questions.
range.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Um,
maybe you're like imagining what you're
sure.
telling yourself. Like maybe it's not dying just because I had a cramp.
Maybe I
Maybe this is
shouldn't
just
have
a
eaten, maybe I shouldn't
yes,
have eaten that thing that I don't generally eat, and that's probably what's upsetting my stomach, kind of thing.
right.
Um, so I've had to learn to rein that in, because before, where it was ignore, 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 oh, you're practically bleeding to death, but it's probably nothing. And now like a
Yes.
little tummy aches, like, am I dying? So
Yes.
it's definitely been an experience. It's been a process of trying to find that happy medium. So I do take better care of myself than I did before. I wasn't horrible. I did overwork. I did sit in my chair at my desk for too long, which likely
I'm
did
also
contribute to
guilty
the
of
leg
that, so no
swelling. Yeah.
judgment there.
Well, and yes, that can cause leg swelling, but I had like cancerous activity in one of my lymph nodes, which
Oh, okay.
then contributes to that leg swelling too. So it is one of those things where I do make a point to get up and walk around more frequently, which means I
Oh,
don't
that's
get as much
great.
done as I should. Like,
Yeah.
my writing schedule has not gotten back to where it needs to be, but it's getting closer. Like, there's a lot of busy work that I'm trying to catch up on, because when you do run your own business like we do, there's nobody there waiting in the wings to do the work while you're out sick. Like, you can take vacation
Yes.
and sick time, but the work's going to be there when you get back. And so I'm doing a
Heavy
lot of
is the head that wears the crown, and it's all dependent on you, like your decisions, your
sure.
creativity, your work.
Well,
Yeah, it is challenge.
it's
It's a unique kind of challenge for sure.
sure. And when you're an independent author running your own business and not just, writing the books, like, a lot of people don't see that 90% of the work behind the curtain is boring marketing metadata, like running a website, setting up newsletters, like it's all that, you know, grittier
Yeah.
stuff that's
You're
not
in a
the fun.
chair, breaking your back, in my case.
Yeah. They're envisioning us at a cafe in Paris coming up with whimsical lines of prose, but yeah, we're mostly just doing the grunt work back here. So,
For sure.
but
Would you say
so
that there are any self-care practices that have been especially great at helping you heal your relationship with your body? Is it just the mental, I don't want to say just, but is it the mental self-talk? Is it connecting more with others? What do you feel has been the most
I have
helpful
gotten
in you
stricter
healing that
with.
relationship?
Sure. I've gotten stricter with, and I say stricter, I've become more, I've gotten more into routines. I feel like that's a good way to gauge how you're feeling. If you have a set thing you do every day
Mhm.
and you get more tired like an hour before you're done doing that stuff, it's a good way to gauge, like, oh, okay, and to see a pattern emerge. And I think that's a better way of determining if you need to see a doctor or if it's nothing. So like
Yeah.
I get up about the same time every day, and I have my coffee and my water and my banana, and I should be switching that coffee back to green tea soon, but through
No,
through the winter,
no
caffeine.
judgment, I'll say as I drink my latte.
But I get more physical activity than I did before, and that's partly because my husband went back to work last year because of all of our medical debt and me taking time off work. He was a house spouse for like 8.5 years, and now I'm helping out with a lot more of the domestic work. And part of that is good because I do need to get the physical activity moving. Like, going through what I went through, I feel like I lost a lot of muscle mass. Like, I lost a lot of weight, period. But when you do lose weight, like, it's always going to be muscle too. And so it's felt good just getting that physical activity that I wasn't getting. So I'm like taking care of laundry and vacuuming and taking the dog out more and fixing all the meals for our kiddo and the homeschooling stuff. And that doesn't sound probably too physical to a lot of people, but for someone
I
who
mean,
mostly
it's a
just
lot of movement, especially if you had been that
yeah,
sick, and you,
yeah,
I'm sure, I don't know about you, but when I got COVID last year for the first time, supposedly, and I was out for several weeks. And then when I started just to
Yeah.
do really simple things, I was like, oh my God, I feel so weak. So I mean, even
Yeah.
if you're just, you
Well, when I
know,
was going through radiation, just getting up and like doing a few laps around the kitchen island, just walking around the kitchen
mhm,
island would wind me. But I did it just so I could get the circulation in my legs going.
yeah, good
But
for you.
routine wise, I know like if I can get the vacuuming done and like get to like 2 or 3 o'clock in the afternoon, and then my energy levels start to drop off. If they drop off sooner than that while I'm doing all this other work, then I start to worry. If I do a couple days of, oh, like it should be getting better, not worse, right? So
Right. Well, healing is, you've got those, you trend upward. I like to use that expression. It's trending upward. It's not just a straight progress,
yeah,
better, better, better. Like there's going to be some dips and grooves, but if you're
yeah,
looking at it over a longer period of time and it seems like it's getting better, it's like, okay, that day I was
sure.
just a little low.
Yeah. But I feel like those routines and schedules are a good way to help you gauge. Like,
Yeah, where you are, like how you're doing, how the recovery
yeah.
is coming. Do you feel that your creativity was a part of you being able to heal, or maybe not yet, maybe you will work it into future projects, but how do you see creativity in the context of your healing?
The writing part has been tough because every time I sit down in front of my computer, there's that grunt work, the behind the scenes stuff that I'm still working through, book updates that need to be done, website updates that need to be done, and I am getting back into the marketing part of it. So it's slowly progressing where there's chunks of it, but it's the stuff that I feel like I have to do before I can write. And I'm trying to convince myself now that that stuff can be set on the back burner, that I've done all the crucial stuff and that I can dedicate that time to actually putting words on the page. That's, one of the New Year's resolutions, one of the schedules I keep trying to make, slowly working these things into it. But creative wise, there have been some things that as I've healed, like last year, leading into Halloween, my son asked for a complicated costume. He wanted to be Mater from the Cars universe. And so
Mhm.
artistically, yeah, I was able to put together this pretty nice costume that he really enjoyed, that got a lot of compliments. And then coming into Christmas, I did bust out my art supplies and made some homemade ornaments for friends and things like that. So the writing creative part is coming. I feel like the art part was easier for me because it's always
Yeah,
been something I've enjoyed too.
we consider it all creativity here.
Yeah.
One is not better than the other for sure. But I'm
So
glad
it's
that you were
kind
able
of
to find those
slow.
outlets, yeah, to keep doing that and is able to give you something maybe to ground and spend more time with your family and connect with them. And because I do personally think that creativity is extremely important to health and healing. And so it sounds like you had that outlet for yourself as well. So before we go, I have one last question for you. You mentioned gratitude earlier. For me, gratitude is connected to the third pillar, which is our spirit pillar. It's our connection to creativity, joy, purposeful work, and it's obviously very important for our mental health. What is one thing that is giving you joy and happiness these days? Can you share with us something that's like making your life worth living? No pressure.
Um, and I'll go back to my son here too, but I know a lot of people don't have kids, but if you have pets, that's great too because we do have right before my diagnosis situation, a few months before everything started getting really bad, we adopted Lulu, our Great Pyrenees, and
She's so cute. I'll have to find
yeah,
a photo or something to share
she's
in
laying
the
outside
social
of my
media
office
and
door.
yeah.
Yeah, she's very put out right now that she's not allowed in here. So,
The
but
the
yeah, she
insult.
I think just having, even if you're an introvert or independent, having a pet, a friend, your kid, like those people that are close to you that you feel like are in it with you for the rest of your life, to have
Sure.
them close and to not just be grateful to them, but to kind of reciprocate, like I say, like the care that they gave me while I was going through what I went through. And I feel like now that I'm well, it's just that instinctive, I want to make sure they know how much I appreciate them. And that's probably why I spent a couple months working on Zabe's costume, and why, even though my checkups for the doctors now are every 6 months, Zabe will still occasionally ask to go to the carousel. And so we'll just drive up to the city just to take him to the carousel. Just it was
Yes.
so sweet of him to hang in there with us through that, because that was, that was 5 days a week, and they were with me at least 3 of those. My mother would come down and help for a couple. Um, so we make sure we still do outings with Save. I don't want it to be like, oh, we only do these fun things when someone's
When something
dying.
terrible is happening.
So, but and
That's
we work
one way to
things
make it special.
out. Sure. And
But that's great.
Paul had an injury at work, so I guess like it's one of those full circle things. I'll be taking care of him after he has shoulder surgery here soon. So
Oh,
I think
okay.
it's just a blessing to be able to take care of people
Take care of
like
each other.
yeah, because being fiercely independent, I think there's a lot of guilt involved too when you do have to let
For
go of the
sure.
reins and let someone else take care of you.
Oh,
Uh,
absolutely.
you feel like
Absolutely.
a burden, but then when you really think about it, it's like, oh, it really is one of the biggest gifts to have someone that close to you that you want to take care of. And so the people that took care of me, and I think about even like my mother, when she went through foot surgery, I went up and stayed with her for a little bit to help her through until her foot was healed. Um, so it's one of those things where it is like when you think about the care and that you give other people, you don't look at it like a burden. You look at it as you're glad to be able to do this for them. And you have to remember that people are that way with you too. So it's made me feel like I not am less independent, but it's made me feel more comfortable with putting my care into the hands of people that I trust and love. And it's almost like giving them the opportunity to prove that too. So if you ever question, do they care? Like it's almost, I don't want to say
Let
it's a
me
test.
see where you show up. What I get real
I don't want to say it's a test, but it's definitely
Yes,
something that re-cements the care of those around you
for sure.
for you, and that you can then reciprocate later on, or even beforehand. Like it's just how life goes. We take care of one another, and I'm glad to be on the other side of it. But I feel better about being on the giving or the receiving end of that too now, going through something like this, because I feel like gratitude definitely goes both ways, being grateful for the care you get, but also grateful for being able to give that care back to someone too.
Amazing. So thank you. Yes, I can see how happiness and joy would be connected to these connections that you've had that helped you through this experience and how they definitely, I'm assuming just from listening to you, that they feel more precious to you and more, I don't want to say time based, but I think you've become very aware that, we only have so much time here. And
Yeah, and you have to
so you have to
prioritize.
be grateful for what you've got
Sure.
while you've got it.
Yeah. I think it definitely changes how you prioritize things, because in your head, if
Sure.
you think, yeah, this is limited, and I think just, I don't want to say a brush with death, but it definitely feels like that was what it was. You really start to, in your head, think about, well, how much time do I have left here? How much will I be able to do here?
Thank you so much, Angela. That was incredible. I'm sure that the listeners will get a lot from this interview. I know that some of them are struggling with their own issues with chronic pain or illness in their life. And so there's a lot of value for you sharing your experience. So we're very grateful for you coming on the show today and sharing that with us. Also, I just wanted to let you guys know that if you're interested in Angela's work and all the amazing things that she's doing, she does have a couple of free books. I believe the first book in her it's Graveyard Shift in the Lana Harvey series is free. And is your first book in Blood Vice free too still
Yeah.
at this time? Awesome. So definitely check those out. I love the Blood Vice series. I mean, I fell in love with her over the Graveyard Shift, but Blood Vice I love even more because it's like the cop gets I don't want to say eaten, but she turns into a vampire on the job because she's trying to stop something. So it's just an amazing story for me. If you love urban fantasy, it's a really great story to check out. A great series. And so check those out for sure. And then also, we're going to talk to Angela a little bit more in the after show. So if you are a patron of this podcast, please join us over in the patron community so that you can get the after show bonus Q&A and stuff that we're going to do with Angela here next. Otherwise, I will be back next week with another episode of A Well Cared For Human. And until then, please take good care of you. This episode of A Well Cared For Human was written and produced by me, Kory Marie. The music was by Late Night Feeler and Esther Abrami.
If you like what I'm doing here, please consider visiting my Patreon. For as little as $1 a month, you get early ad-free access to the episodes, as well as a monthly patrons-only Q&A, bonus videos, and more. Not to mention that your Patreon support lets me know that you find value in the show and want it to continue. You can find me on Patreon by visiting www.patreon.com/Kory Marie. If you can't support the show financially, that is okay. You can still subscribe to the show, leave a review of the show, and recommend the show to your friends, not just the neurotic ones. All of this helps so much. And as always, thank you for listening.